All right, 27. This is required on all those points which Antonius said must be observed in order to gain credit to our statements when we explain anything, or when we conciliate the feelings, or when we excite the passions of our audience. But in the particular which I mentioned last, amplification is of the greatest effect, and excellence in it the peculiar and appropriate praise of the orator. Even that exercise is of more than ordinary importance, which Antonius illustrated in the latter part of his dissertation. In the beginning, he set it aside. I mean that of panegyric and satire, for nothing is better preparative for exaggeration and amplification in a speech than the talent of performing both these parts in a most effective manner. Consequently, even those topics are of use which, though they ought to be proper to causes and to be inherent in their very vitals, yet as they are commonly applied to general subjects, have been by the ancients dominated commonplaces, of which some consist in bitter accusations and complaints against vices and crimes, with a certain amplification, in opposition to which nothing is usually said or can be said as against an embezzler of the public money, or a traitor, or a parricide, remarks which we ought to introduce when the charges have been proved, for otherwise they are jejune and trifling. Others consist in entreaty or commiseration. Others relate to consented points of argument, whence you may be entitled to speak fully on either side of any general question, an exercise which is now imagined to be peculiar to those two sects of philosophy of which I spoke before. Among those of remote antiquity, it belonged to those from whom all the art and power of speaking in forensic pleadings was derived. For concerning virtue, duty, justice, and equity, dignity, utility, honor, ignominy, rewards, and punishments, and similar subjects, we ought to possess the spirit and talent and address to speak on either side of the question. But since, being driven from our own possessions, we are left in a poor little farm, and even that the subject of litigation, and since, though the patrons of others, we have not been able to preserve and protect our own property, let us borrow what is requisite for us, which is a notable disgrace, from those who have made this irruption into our patrimony. 28. Those, then, who take their name from a very small portion of Athens and its neighborhood, and are dominated peripatetic or academic philosophers, but who formerly, on account of their eminent knowledge in important affairs, were by the Greeks and called political philosophers, being distinguished by a name relating to all public administration, say that every speech on civil affairs is employed on one or other of these two kinds of questions, either that of a definite controversy limited to certain times and parties, as whether is it proper that our captives be removed from the Carthaginians by the restitution of theirs, or on an indefinite question inquiring about a subject generally, as what should be determined or considered concerning captives in general. Of these, they term the former kind of a cause or controversy, and limit it to three things: lawsuits, deliberations, and panegyric. But the other kind of question, or proposition, as it were, the indefinite, is denominated a consultation. So far they instruct us. The rhetoricians, however, use this division in their instructions, but not so that they seem to recover a lost possession by right, by a decision in their favor, or by force, but appear, according to the practice of the civil law, to assert their claim to the premise by breaking off a branch. For they keep possession of that former kind which is restricted to certain times, places, and parties, and that, as it were, by the hem of the garment. For at this present time, under Philo, who flourishes, I hear, as chief of the academy, the knowledge and practice of even though these hold on the knowledge and practice of even these causes is much observed. As to the latter kind, they only mention it in delivering the first principles of the art, and say that it belongs to the orator, but neither explain its powers, nor its nature, nor its parts, nor general heads, so that it had better have been passed over entirely than left when it was once attempted. For they are now understood to say nothing about it for want of something to say. In the other case, they would have appeared to be silent from judgment.